What happens when entitlement meets tradition? When a tourist's arrogance clashes with centuries of honor and discipline? Today's story will show you exactly how a moment of disrespect led to consequences that nobody saw coming. Make sure to watch until the end, because what happened next shocked everyone present that day. But before we dive into this incredible story, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss our daily doses of justice served and powerful life lessons. The morning sun cast long shadows across the historic grounds of Hampton Court Palace, where centuries of British monarchy had left their indelible mark on every stone and statue. The air was crisp with early autumn freshness, carrying the faint scent of carefully manicured royal gardens. It was here, against this backdrop of timeless elegance, that James Mitchell stood guard. James wasn't just any guard, he was a member of the elite Queen's Guard, his scarlet tunic gleaming like fresh spilled wine against the ancient stonework. Every button on his uniform shone with military precision, his bearskin cap sat perfectly aligned, and his posture was as straight as the ceremonial rifle he held. At 28, he was among the youngest of the guards, but his dedication to duty ran as deep as the palace foundations themselves. The morning had started like any other, with streams of tourists flooding the palace grounds, their excited chatter mixing with the click-clack of countless cameras. Most visitors maintained a respectful distance, understanding the gravity of the position these guards held. They were not mere tourist attractions, but serving members of the British military, tasked with protecting one of the nation's most precious historical sites. Sarah Chen, a popular travel vlogger, stood nearby, her camera carefully documenting the scene. She'd visited countless historical sites across Europe, but there was something special about the British Royal Guards. Their unwavering discipline, their stoic presence, their embodiment of centuries-old tradition. Little did she know her camera would soon capture something far more dramatic than her usual travel content. Emma Collins, a history teacher from Yorkshire, watched the scene with growing unease. She'd brought her students here many times before, always teaching them about the importance of respecting these guards and what they represented. But today, something felt different. Perhaps it was the way that loud group of American tourists kept edging closer and closer to the guard position. Or maybe it was their ringleader's increasingly aggressive attempts to get a reaction. That ringleader was Derek Anderson, a 42-year-old tech executive from Chicago who treated the world like his personal playground. His designer sunglasses probably cost more than some people's monthly rent, and his booming voice carried the unmistakable tone of someone used to getting his way. He wore a garish London Rocks t-shirt that seemed to scream for attention, matched with cargo shorts that had more pockets than sense. "Hey, come on, buddy. Give us a smile." Derek's voice cut through the respectful murmur of the crowd like a foghorn through morning mist. "We came all this way to see you guys. The least you could do is move a little." He waved his hands in front of James's face, his golden watch flashing in the sunlight. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Grace Parker, an experienced tour guide who had seen her fair share of tourist misbehavior, stepped forward to intervene. "Sir, please remember these are active military personnel. There are clear guidelines about—" "Guidelines?" Derek cut her off with a dismissive wave. "I paid good money to visit this place. These guys are here for our entertainment, right? I mean, why else would they dress like this?" A ripple of disapproval moved through the growing crowd. Michael O'Brien, a local who was showing his Canadian cousins around, muttered under his breath, "Bloody tourist thinks he owns the place." Several phones were already raised, recording what was quickly becoming an uncomfortable scene. James Mitchell remained perfectly still, his eyes fixed forward, embodying centuries of discipline and tradition. But behind his stoic expression, something stirred. Not anger, but a deep understanding that what was about to unfold would become a lesson none of these tourists would ever forget. The tension in the air was becoming as thick as London fog. Derek Anderson, emboldened by what he perceived as an audience rather than witnesses, took another step closer to James Mitchell's post. The guard's composure remained unshakable, but the atmosphere around him had changed, like the stillness before a storm. "Look at this guy, he's like a statue," Derek's voice carried across the courtyard, drawing even more unwanted attention.
"Hey everyone, watch this. I bet I can make him move."
He pulled out his phone, preparing to take what he thought would be a viral-worthy selfie. Sarah Chen, still recording, felt her influencer instincts kick in. This wasn't the content she usually shared, but she knew she was documenting something significant. Her fingers hovered over the stop recording button, but something told her to keep filming. This wasn't going to end well, and the world needed to see why. "Sir," Grace Parker tried once more, her professional tone carrying an edge of urgency, "I must insist you step back behind the line. These barriers are here for a reason, and the guards are authorized to..." Authorized to what? Derek spun around, his face flushed with the kind of arrogance that only comes from a lifetime of avoiding consequences. "Stand there like expensive mannequins? Come on, what's the worst that could happen?" Emma Collins had unconsciously pulled her handbag closer, a gesture of discomfort that reflected the crowd's growing unease. She caught the eye of Thomas Walker, an elderly veteran who had been watching the scene unfold with increasing displeasure. His chest, decorated with service. Medals rose and fell with controlled anger. "Young man," Thomas called out, his voice carrying the weight of years of military service, "that uniform represents more than you seem to understand. It's not a costume for your amusement." But Derek was beyond hearing reason. The audience he'd gathered, the phones recording his performance, the thrill of being the center of attention, it all fed into his worst instincts. He was a man used to buying his way out of trouble, used to rules bending around his wallet like light around a black hole. Marcus Thompson, the second guard stationed nearby, could see what was unfolding from his post. Though his position remained fixed, his years of military training had taught him to read situations, and every instinct was telling him this was about to escalate. Lucy Bennett pulled her young son closer, sensing the shift in atmosphere. "Oliver," she whispered, "this is why we respect the guards. They're not here for entertainment." The boy nodded, his eyes wide as he watched the scene unfold, absorbing a lesson very different from the one Derek was trying to teach. "Hey, buddy!" Derek was now close enough that his breath could fog James's buttons. "I heard you guys can't move no matter what. That true?" He waved his hand inches from James's face, his golden watch catching the sunlight. "What are they paying you to act like this? Minimum wage to play soldier." Michael O'Brien had seen enough. "Mate, back off!" he called out, his Irish accent thick with frustration. "You're making a right fool of yourself." But Derek was in his element now, playing to the crowd like a street performer who had forgotten the difference between attention and respect. "Watch this," he announced, lifting his phone higher. "This is going viral, folks. Your boy Derek's about to become internet famous." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion, yet happened faster than anyone could react. Derek, his face twisted in a smirk that would soon become infamous, did the unthinkable. He tilted his head back slightly, gathered saliva in his mouth, and with deliberate malice spat directly at James Mitchell's immaculate uniform. The crowd's collective gasp was like a vacuum, sucking all other sound from the courtyard. Sarah Chen's hand flew to her mouth, but her camera kept rolling. Emma Collins turned away in disgust, while Thomas Walker's face darkened with a rage that only veterans can truly understand. The spittle landed on James's scarlet tunic, a disgusting mark of disrespect against centuries of tradition. For a fraction of a second, time seemed to stop. The world held its breath, waiting to see what. would happen next? Derek, high on his own audacity, started to laugh. See, nothing, these guys are just... But he never finished that sentence, because in that moment, James Mitchell moved. The movement was so swift, so precise, that later, when the videos went viral, viewers would have to slow down the footage to fully appreciate what happened. James Mitchell, trained in the finest military traditions of Britain, moved with the fluid grace of a predator. His ceremonial rifle, which had been perfectly positioned against his shoulder, swung down in a controlled arc. The crowd barely had time to gasp before James's voice cut through the air like a steel blade. "Step back! You are in direct violation of Crown property and military protocol." Derek Anderson, who had been grinning just seconds before, suddenly found himself facing not a statue, but a highly trained military professional. The guard's eyes, previously fixed straight ahead, now bore into him with an intensity that made his knees weak. "Hey, take it easy!" Derek stumbled backward, his bravado evaporating like morning dew. "It was just a joke, man. Just having some fun."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
His designer sunglasses slipped down his nose, revealing eyes wide with sudden understanding that he had made a terrible mistake. Marcus Thompson, the second guard, had also moved from his post, creating a coordinated response that spoke of years of training. The two guards now formed an imposing barrier between Derek and the crowd, their synchronized movements a reminder that these were not mere tourist attractions, but elite military personnel. Sarah Chen's followers would later call this the most compelling content she'd ever shared. Her steady hands captured every moment. The way James's bearskin cap caught the sunlight as he moved, the startled expression on Derek's face, the approving nods from the crowd. "Having fun, were you?" The new voice belonged to Robert Davies, a police officer who seemed to materialize from nowhere, his timing impeccable. "Assaulting a member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces doesn't fall under anyone's definition of fun, sir." Derek's face, already pale, turned almost ghostly. "Assault? No, you don't understand. I'm a tourist. I paid to be here." He reached for his wallet, a gesture that had solved many of his problems in the past. "Look, I can pay for any cleaning the uniform needs. Let's just forget this happened." Thomas Walker, the veteran, stepped forward, his medals gleaming. "Pay? You think you can pay for dishonoring the uniform? The same uniform men have died wearing while protecting this nation." His voice carried the weight of history itself. Officer Davies was already pulling out his notepad. "Sir, spitting on a royal guard is a criminal offense under Section 89 of the Police Act 1996. It's classified as assault on a serviceman." His tone was professional, but carried an undercurrent of satisfaction. "I'll need to see your identification." The crowd had formed a perfect circle around the scene, phones recording every moment. Emma Collins couldn't help but notice how her earlier unease had been justified. "Every action has consequences," she murmured, the teacher in her recognizing a perfect learning moment. Derek's attempts to talk his way out became increasingly desperate. "Listen, I'm an American citizen. You can't just..." He fumbled with his phone, probably searching for the US Embassy's number. "Being American doesn't exempt you from British law, sir," Officer Davies continued, unmoved. "In fact, this incident could affect your ability to enter the UK in the future." Grace Parker, the tour guide, had seen many tourists misbehave, but this was different. She watched as a second police officer arrived, this one carrying a thick binder of protocols and procedures. "The palace has a zero-tolerance policy for assaulting guards," she explained to her wide-eyed tour group. "This is why we emphasize respect and proper behavior during our orientations." Lucy Bennett's young son, Oliver, tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, is the bad man going to jail?" The question carried across the courtyard, causing several people to chuckle despite the tension. "The gentleman will face appropriate consequences for his actions, young man," Officer Davies answered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The word gentleman carried enough irony to forge a sword. As Derek was being led away for questioning, his expensive watch and designer sunglasses seemed less impressive than they had just minutes ago. His London Rocks t-shirt now felt like a mockery of everything he'd failed to understand about British culture and respect. James Mitchell and Marcus Thompson returned to their posts with military precision, their movements synchronized and dignified. The only evidence of the incident was a small, dark stain on James's tunic, a stain that would soon be cleaned, while Derek's reputation would be permanently marked. Michael O'Brien, still filming like many others, nodded in satisfaction. "That's going straight on YouTube, that is. Let it be a lesson to anyone who thinks our guards are just for show. If you thought that was intense, wait until you see what happened next." The aftermath of this incident shook social media and changed palace security forever. By evening, Hampton Court Palace had returned to its usual serene state, but the digital world was erupting like a volcano of public opinion. Sarah Chen's video, along with dozens of others captured by tourists, had spread across social media platforms faster than a London rain shower. The hashtag #JustRoyalGuardRespect was trending worldwide, with millions of views and shares. Commentators from every corner of the globe weighed in on the incident, creating a virtual tsunami of support for James Mitchell and the institution he represented. "This is what happens when you mess with the Queen's Guard," read one viral tweet with over 200,000 likes. From entitled tourist to social media's biggest lesson in respect, karma served perfectly, declared another. Derek Anderson's day wasn't getting any better. Sitting in a small interview room at the local police station, he was beginning to understand the full magnitude of his actions. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. His face was everywhere, and not in the way he had hoped when he'd started his performance that morning. "Mr. Anderson," Officer Davies said, reviewing the paperwork spread before him. "In addition to the assault charges, the palace authorities are considering pressing additional charges for violating protected site protocols. Do you understand the seriousness of your position?" Derek's designer shirt was wrinkled now, his earlier swagger replaced by slumped shoulders and a face that had aged 10 years in as many hours. I never meant for this to go so far," he mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. "Back home, I'm a respected executive. I've never been in trouble with the law before." Meanwhile, back at the palace, James Mitchell was being commended by his superior officers for his handling of the situation. His response had been textbook perfect, measured, professional, and within all protocols. The commanding officer, Colonel Richard Harrison, made a special visit to the guard station. "Mitchell," the colonel addressed him, "your actions today reminded everyone what the Queen's Guard truly represents. It's not just about standing guard, it's about maintaining the dignity of centuries of tradition." Grace Parker had already modified her tour guide script to include a new, emphatic section about respecting the guards. Her afternoon group listened with rapt attention as she explained, "What we witnessed today was not just about one guard and one tourist. It was about the clash between respect and entitlement, between tradition and thoughtless self-promotion." The story had caught the attention of major news networks. Emma Collins found herself being interviewed by a BBC reporter, recounting what she'd witnessed. "As a history teacher," she explained, "I often tell my students about the importance of respecting our traditions. Today, we all saw why these aren't just empty words." Thomas Walker, the veteran, had been asked to provide commentary for a news segment about the historical significance of the Queen's Guard. "These young men and women," he explained, his medals catching the studio lights, carry the weight of British military tradition on their shoulders. Each uniform represents centuries of service and sacrifice. Social media continue to churn out memes and commentary when keeping it real goes wrong. Tourist edition. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. From TikTok fame to Scotland. Yard shame. Lucy Bennett's son, Oliver, had drawn a picture of the incident for his school project about British heroes. His teacher would later share it on the school's social media, where it gathered its own wave of positive attention. The simple artwork showed James Mitchell standing tall while a small scribbled figure ran away. A child's perfect understanding of justice served. The Palace gift shop reported an unexpected surge in sales of Guard-related merchandise, with visitors now showing an increased interest in learning about the history and training of the Queen's Guard. Sarah Chen's vlog about the incident became her most viewed video ever, but she chose to focus on the educational aspect rather than the sensationalism. Today's incident teaches us all something valuable about respect, she told her millions of followers in a follow-up video. These guards aren't here for our entertainment. They're serving members of the military, protecting our history and traditions. Back at the police station, Derek's situation was going from bad to worse. His company's PR team had already released a statement distancing themselves from his actions. His social media accounts were flooded with negative comments, and several speaking engagements he had scheduled in London were suddenly postponed indefinitely. Your passport will be held until the court date, Officer Davies explained, his tone professional but firm. The minimum fine for this offence is $5,000, but given the circumstances and the video evidence, the Crown prosecutor may seek additional penalties. Michael O'Brien's video had been picked up by several major news outlets, each running their own analysis of the incident. Legal experts weighed in on television, explaining the seriousness of assaulting a member of the military guard and the potential consequences for international tourists who disrespect historical institutions. As the sun set over Hampton Court Palace, James Mitchell completed his shift with the same professional dignity he'd shown all day. The small stain on his uniform had been cleaned, but the impact of his composed response would leave a lasting mark on how people viewed the Queen's Guard. Several days later, a letter arrived at the palace barracks. It was from a school in Yorkshire where Emma Collins taught. Her students had written thank you notes to the guards, expressing their admiration for their dedication and discipline. One note particularly stood out. "Thank you for showing us that some things are worth standing up for, even when you're standing still." If this story taught us anything, it's that respect isn't just a word. It's an action that carries consequences. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who appreciates seeing justice served with dignity and professionalism. What do you think about how this situation was handled? Should there be stricter penalties for tourists who disrespect historical guards and monuments? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. 1 month after the incident that shook Hampton Court Palace, the ripple effects were still being felt across the globe. The viral video had sparked something larger than just another social media moment. It had initiated a worldwide conversation about respect, tradition, and the consequences of entitled behavior in our digital age. Derek Anderson's court date had finally arrived. The once confident executive now sat in the Westminster Magistrates' Court, his expensive suit doing little to mask his diminished presence. His legal team had advised him to plead guilty, hoping for leniency, but the prosecution was determined to make an example of this case. "Your Honor," the Crown prosecutor addressed the court, "this isn't merely about one act of disrespect. This incident has highlighted a growing problem at our historical sites and monuments. Mr. Anderson's actions represent a troubling trend of visitors treating our cultural heritage as mere props for social media entertainment. The courtroom was packed with journalists, while outside a crowd had gathered, including several veterans in full-dress uniform. Thomas Walker was among them, standing proud despite his age, his medals catching the morning light. "This case is about more than just one guard or one tourist," he told a BBC reporter. "It's about preserving the dignity of our institutions." Sarah Chen, whose original video had now exceeded 50 million views, had been called as a witness. Her testimony provided crucial context about tourist behavior and social media influence. "As a content creator," she explained to the court, "I've seen how the pursuit of viral fame can cloud people's judgment, but some lines should never be crossed." The impact of the incident had already led to significant changes. The Palace Heritage Trust had implemented new visitor guidelines, which were being adopted by historical sites across Britain. Grace Parker had helped develop a comprehensive tourist orientation program that was now mandatory for all tour groups. "We're not trying to discourage enthusiasm or interest," Grace explained during a training session for new tour guides. "We're teaching visitors how to engage respectfully with living history. These guards aren't actors. They're serving military personnel deserving of respect." Emma Collins had been invited to contribute to a new educational curriculum about British traditions and heritage. Her first-hand account of the incident had become a powerful teaching tool. "Students need to understand that tradition isn't just about the past," she said during a teachers' conference. "It's about maintaining standards that define who we are as a society." James Mitchell, the guard at the center of it all, had received hundreds of letters of support from around the world. One particularly touching note came from a young American soldier. "Your composure under disrespect showed me what true military discipline looks like. You've become a role model for service. Members everywhere." The incident had even sparked legislative action. Parliament was now considering the Heritage Protection Act, which would impose stricter penalties for disrespecting historical guards and monuments. The bill had garnered surprising cross-party support. Lucy Bennett's son, Oliver, had started a children's campaign called Respect the Guard at his school, which had spread to other primary schools across London. Children were learning about the Guard's role and significance through age-appropriate activities and stories. Michael O'Brien's original footage had been incorporated into a new documentary about changing tourist behavior in the digital age. "We've created a culture where everything is content," he observed during an interview. "But some things deserve to be treated with reverence, not just as background for a selfie." The Palace gift shop had transformed one section into an educational center, where visitors could learn about the Guard's training, history, and daily responsibilities. Marcus Thompson, the second guard from that fateful day, had contributed to the information displays during his off-duty hours. "People are finally asking the right questions," Marcus noted during a rare interview. "They want to know about our training, our responsibilities, what the uniform represents. That's the kind of interest we should be encouraging." Derek Anderson's company had permanently accepted his resignation, and his story had become a cautionary tale in corporate ethics training sessions. Success in one area of life doesn't grant immunity from respecting traditions and laws in another, read their new employee conduct guidelines. The tourism industry had taken notice too. Major travel companies were now including cultural sensitivity training in their tour packages. Respect local customs and traditions had moved from a footnote to a headline in travel guides. Colonel Richard Harrison had been promoted to oversee a new initiative for public engagement with military traditions. "We are not hiding behind walls," he explained at a press conference. "We're inviting people to understand and respect what we represent. There's a right way to appreciate our heritage. As Derek Anderson finally stood to hear his sentence, the courtroom fell silent. The judge's words would set a precedent for future cases and send a message about how British society valued its traditions. "Mr. Anderson," the judge began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed courtroom, "your actions that day demonstrated not just disrespect for one god, but contempt for the values and traditions that help define a nation. This court sentences you to..." The judge's voice resonated through the packed courtroom like a bell tolling the hour. "Mr. Anderson, this court sentences you to 6 months imprisonment, suspended for 2 years, a fine of 10,000 and 200 hours of community service to be performed at British historical sites under supervision." The silence that followed was deafening. Derek Anderson's shoulders slumped visibly as the judge continued, "Furthermore, you will be required to attend cultural sensitivity training, and your entry into the United Kingdom will be restricted for the next 5 years, requiring special permission for any future visits." Sarah Chen's camera captured the moment perfectly. The once proud executive, now humbled by justice, while Thomas Walker and other veterans in attendance nodded in solemn approval. The sentence would soon become another viral moment. But this time for all the right reasons. "The court wishes to send a clear message," the judge added, her words measured and deliberate. "Our cultural heritage and those who guard it are not commodities for entertainment. They represent centuries of tradition, sacrifice, and honor." Outside the courthouse, the media frenzy was intense. News crews from around the world jostled for position, each seeking to capture reactions to what was being called a landmark, a verdict in cultural preservation. Emma Collins, who had attended the sentencing, was approached by several reporters. "This verdict isn't just about punishment," she explained, her teacher's instinct for clarification showing through. "It's about education. Every action has consequences, and some lessons need to be learned the hard way." Meanwhile, at Hampton Court Palace, James Mitchell continued his duties with the same unwavering dedication. He had declined all requests for interviews, letting his actions speak louder than any words could. His commanding officer had noted in an official report that Mitchell's handling of the incident would be used as a training example for future guards. Grace Parker had already incorporated the court's decision into her tour guide presentations. "The verdict represents a turning point," she told her afternoon group, which was notably more attentive than usual. "It establishes that respect for our traditions isn't optional, it's mandatory." The impact rippled across social media platforms. "Justice served. Respect isn't just a word, it's the law. Chaka Royal Guard Justice. From entitled tourist to cautionary tale in 6 months flat. This is how you protect heritage. Other countries take note." Lucy Bennett's son, Oliver, had been allowed to miss school to attend the sentencing with his mother. "Mum," he whispered as they left the courthouse, "the bad man learned his lesson, didn't he?" His innocent question captured the essence of what many were feeling. Michael O'Brien's original video had now been viewed over 100 million times, spawning countless reaction videos, analyses, and educational content. "It's become more than just a viral moment," he observed during a podcast interview. "It's a teaching tool about respect and consequences." The Palace Heritage Trust announced new initiatives in the wake of the verdict. "We're implementing the Respect and Remember program," a spokesperson explained. "Visitors will now receive comprehensive orientation about the significance of our guards and the proper way to interact with our living history." Thomas Walker had been invited to speak at schools across London about military tradition and respect. "When I was serving," he told a group of fascinated teenagers, "we knew the uniform represented something larger than ourselves. That hasn't changed, and it never should." Derek Anderson's story had become a case study in international business schools, examining how personal conduct can have global repercussions. His image was now featured in cultural sensitivity training materials worldwide, though not in the way he had once hoped for social media fame. Sarah Chen's follow-up documentary, Guards Beyond the Surface, had gained critical acclaim for its thoughtful exploration of military tradition in the modern age. What started as a viral incident has become a global conversation about respect. She noted in the film's introduction, the Heritage Protection Act had passed with overwhelming support, establishing new guidelines for visitor behavior at historical sites across Britain. Colonel Richard Harrison had been instrumental in shaping the legislation, ensuring it balanced preservation of tradition with public access. James Mitchell had received a commendation for his service, though he accepted it with characteristic humility. His fellow guard, Marcus Thompson, later revealed that Mitchell had donated his portion of the court-mandated fine to a veterans' charity. The Palace Gift Shop's educational center had become a mandatory first stop for all tour groups. "Understanding comes before experiencing," read the new welcome sign, alongside a photo of the guards in formation. Visitors now spent time learning about the guards' role before encountering them in person. 6 months after the verdict, Derek Anderson wrote a public letter of apology that was published in major newspapers. "My actions that day reflected the worst of modern attitudes toward tradition. The consequences I faced were justified, and the lesson I learned was invaluable." The incident had sparked a global movement, with historical sites worldwide adopting similar protective measures. The British have shown us how to preserve dignity. In the age of social media, a curator at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington commented, "As the sun set on another day at Hampton Court Palace, James Mitchell completed his shift with the same precision and dignity that had made him an unexpected symbol of traditional values in the modern world." A young girl in the crowd whispered to her mother, "Is that the brave guard from the video?" "Yes," her mother replied, "but remember, he was brave long before any video. That's what the uniform means." And there you have it, the complete story of how one moment of disrespect led to lasting change. This isn't just about a tourist and a guard. It's about the enduring power of tradition and the importance of respect in our fast-paced digital world. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who value respect and tradition. Your engagement helps us bring more powerful real-life stories to light. 1 year after the incident that changed Hampton Court Palace forever, its ripple effects had spread far beyond British shores. What began as one tourist's moment of disrespect had evolved into a global movement for protecting cultural heritage. Sites and their guardians. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, had taken notice. At their annual conference in Geneva, they unveiled the Global Heritage Guard initiative, directly inspired by the Hampton Court incident. Sarah Chen, whose original video had now surpassed 200 million views, was invited as a keynote speaker. What happened that day wasn't just about one guard and one tourist, she told the assembled delegates. It was about the intersection of tradition and technology, respect and viral fame. It forced us to ask ourselves, what price are we willing to pay for a moment of social media glory? James Mitchell had been promoted to head of guard training, though he still preferred to maintain his regular posts. His training program, Dignity Under Fire, had been adopted by ceremonial guards worldwide, from the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington to the Royal Palace in Stockholm. "The principles remain the same," he explained during a rare interview with the BBC. "Maintain composure, uphold tradition, and let your actions speak louder than words." His composed response to Derek Anderson's provocation was now used as a training video in military academies across the globe. Derek Anderson's story had taken an unexpected turn. After serving his community service at various historical sites, he had experienced what he called an awakening. He now ran a consulting firm specializing in cultural sensitivity training for international business travelers. "My shame became my purpose," he wrote in his best-selling memoir, From Disgrace to Grace. How I learned respect the hard way. Sometimes, the worst moment of your life can become the foundation for something meaningful. The tourism industry had undergone a massive transformation. Major travel companies now required clients to sign cultural respect pledges before booking tours to historical sites. Grace Parker had been instrumental in developing these guidelines, which were being translated into dozens of languages. "It's not about restricting people's enjoyment," she explained during an international tourism conference in Dubai. "It's about enhancing it through understanding. When you respect what you're seeing, you experience it more deeply." Emma Collins's school curriculum about historical site etiquette had gone international. Respect across borders was now being taught in schools from Tokyo to Toronto. Her students had even started a global pen pal program with children near other historical sites. "Children instinctively understand respect when it's explained properly," she noted during an educational symposium. "They're often the ones teaching their parents about proper behavior at cultural sites." Thomas Walker had become something of a celebrity in veteran circles. His passionate defense of military tradition had sparked a movement called Veterans for Heritage, which now had chapters in 20 countries. They provided volunteer security at historical sites and educated visitors about military customs. "What happened at Hampton Court opened people's eyes," he told a group of American veterans. "At Pearl Harbor, these sites aren't just tourist attractions. They're living memorials to sacrifice and service." Lucy Bennett's son Oliver had grown into his role as a young heritage ambassador. His children's campaign, Respect the Guard, had evolved into an international youth program, with thousands of young members worldwide learning about and protecting their local historical sites. Michael O'Brien's footage had become part of a permanent exhibition at the British Museum, called Tradition in the Digital Age. The installation explored how social media had changed the way people interact with historical sites and cultural traditions. "People watch that video differently now," he observed during the exhibition's opening. "They're not looking for entertainment anymore. They're seeing a moment when our society chose respect over viral fame." Marcus Thompson, the second guard from that fateful day, had been invited to train ceremonial guards at sites around the world. His expertise in maintaining composure while under public scrutiny was highly sought after. "Every uniform tells a story," he explained to a class of guards at India's Red Fort. "When you wear it, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing centuries of tradition and dignity." The Palace Heritage Trust had established the Mitchell Protocol, a comprehensive set of guidelines for visitor behavior at historical sites. These guidelines were now being implemented at everything from small local museums to major international monuments. Colonel Richard Harrison had been appointed to a newly created position, Global Heritage Protection Coordinator. "What we learned from the Hampton Court incident," he explained at a NATO conference, "is that protecting our heritage sites requires international cooperation and understanding." Even the tech industry had responded. Major social media platforms now included special tags and warnings on content filmed at historical sites, reminding users about respectful behavior and potential legal consequences of misconduct. Derek Anderson's original London Rocks t-shirt had been acquired by the British Museum for a different exhibition, Moments That Changed Tourism. It sat in a glass case alongside other artifacts that mark turning points in the relationship between tourists and historical sites. 18 months after the Hampton Court incident, the United Nations World Tourism Organization convened a special session in Madrid. On the agenda was a groundbreaking proposal, the International Cultural Site Protection Act, nicknamed the Mitchell Doctrine, after the Guard who had sparked a global movement. Representatives from 195 countries filled the conference hall. Their attention focused on a series of screens displaying footage from the incident that had changed everything. Sarah Chen's documentary had been translated into 47 languages and was being used to introduce the session. "Ladies and gentlemen," began the Secretary General, "what happened at Hampton Court Palace wasn't just a British incident, it was a wake-up call for the entire world. Today we take historic steps to ensure our cultural heritage receives the protection it deserves." James Mitchell, now an advisor to the British Heritage Protection Committee, sat in the front row alongside Thomas Walker. Neither man had sought the spotlight, but their presence added weight to the proceedings. The uniform Mitchell wore was identical to the one from that fateful day, a reminder that some things shouldn't change. The Mitchell Doctrine proposes 3 fundamental principles, explained Dr. Elena Rodriguez, head of the UNESCO Heritage Protection Task Force. First, universal standards for visitor conduct at historical sites. Second, international consequences for violations. And third, mandatory cultural education for international travelers. Derek Anderson's rehabilitation had become a case study in cultural sensitivity training. He had been invited to address the assembly, not as the villain of the story, but as its cautionary tale and unexpected advocate for change. "Standing here today," he began, his voice heavy with emotion, "I represent everything that was wrong with modern tourism. My actions reflected a broader problem, the commodification of cultural heritage. But from that mistake, we've built something remarkable." Grace Parker had contributed to the visitor conduct guidelines, drawing from her years of experience as a tour guide. "The key," she explained to a committee of tourism experts, "is making respect feel natural, not imposed. When visitors understand the significance of what they're seeing, proper behavior follows naturally." Emma Collins's educational program had been incorporated into the international framework. Schools worldwide would now include cultural heritage, respect as part of their curriculum. "We're not just teaching history anymore," she told the assembly via video link. "We're teaching how to be responsible global citizens." The technology sector had sent representatives as well. Major social media platforms unveiled new features designed to promote respectful behavior at historical sites. Location-based warnings, educational pop-ups, and AI-driven content moderation would help prevent the spread of disrespectful content. "When someone tags their location at a historical site," explained a Silicon Valley executive, "they'll receive information about local customs, expectations, and potential legal consequences. We're using technology to promote respect, not just capture content." Lucy Bennett's son, Oliver, now a youth ambassador for heritage protection, addressed the junior assembly. "Kids my age understand that these places aren't just for taking selfies," he said, drawing smiles from the adult delegates. "They're where history lives, and we need to treat them with respect." Michael O'Brien's footage had become part of the official UN archives, marked as a turning point in cultural heritage protection. "Sometimes," he reflected during a panel discussion, "it takes one clear example to make everyone see what was wrong all along." Marcus Thompson had been instrumental in developing the security protocols section of the Mitchell Doctrine. His experience as a guard had provided valuable insights into the challenges faced by heritage site protectors worldwide. "We're not just protecting buildings or traditions," he explained to the Security Subcommittee. "We're protecting the connection between past and present, between nations and their heritage." Colonel Richard Harrison presented data showing the positive impact of increased heritage protection measures. In the 18 months since the Hampton Court incident, we've seen a 70% reduction in reported disrespectful behavior at historical sites worldwide. The Palace Heritage Trust's Respect and Remember program had become a global standard, adopted by historical sites from the Great Wall of China to the Pyramids of Giza. "What works at Hampton Court," noted a heritage protection expert, "works everywhere because respect is a universal language." As the Assembly moved toward a vote on the Mitchell Doctrine, Sarah Chen premiered a new documentary segment capturing the global impact of the original incident. "From one guard's composure," her narration began, "we learned how to protect our shared heritage." The legal framework proposed was comprehensive: international database of violations, standardized penalties across jurisdictions, cultural sensitivity requirements for visa applications, mandatory heritage site orientation programs, global ban registry for serious offenders. Thomas Walker, addressing a veterans forum during a break in proceedings, summed up the sentiment. "What began as one tourist's disrespect has led to the strongest protection our cultural heritage has ever known." 2 years after the Hampton Court incident, the tourism landscape had transformed beyond recognition. The Mitchell Doctrine had been ratified by 173 countries, creating the most comprehensive cultural protection framework in history. But the real changes were happening on the ground, where a new generation of conscious travelers was redefining what it meant to be a tourist. At Hampton Court Palace, James Mitchell stood at his post, just as he had that fateful day. But now, visitors approached differently. They moved with purpose and respect, understanding that they weren't just visiting a site, they were entering living history. "The difference is remarkable," Grace Parker observed, leading a group of certified cultural tourism guides through their final training. 2 years ago, we were fighting against disrespect. Now, we're channeling curiosity into meaningful engagement. Sarah Chen's latest documentary series, Guardians of Heritage, was streaming worldwide. Each episode featured different ceremonial guards and their roles in protecting cultural sites. The series had become required viewing for international travelers applying for tourist visas. "What we're seeing," she explained during a TED Talk, "is the emergence of conscious tourism. People aren't just traveling to take pictures anymore. They're traveling to understand, to learn, to connect with history in a meaningful way." Derek Anderson had completed his transformation from cautionary tale to cultural ambassador. His consulting firm now worked with major corporations to develop cultural sensitivity training programs. The man who once spat at a guard was now teaching others how to approach cultural sites with respect. "Sometimes," he told a conference of travel industry leaders, "the most powerful lessons come from our worst mistakes. What matters is what we build from those moments of shame." Emma Collins's school curriculum had evolved into a global educational movement. The Junior Heritage Guardians program now had chapters in over 5,000 schools worldwide. Children were learning about cultural respect before they ever stamped their first passport. "We're not just teaching the next generation about history," she explained at an educational summit in Singapore. "We're teaching them how to be custodians of that history." The results have been extraordinary. Thomas Walker had seen his veterans of a heritage program grow into an international network. Former military personnel from different countries now work together to protect cultural sites and share their understanding of ceremony and tradition. "Military service teaches you about honor," he told a gathering of veteran volunteers. "Now, We're teaching others how to recognize and respect that honor in every culture. Lucy Bennett's son, Oliver, had inspired a youth movement. The Next Generation Guards program allowed young people to learn directly from ceremonial guards about their roles and responsibilities. The waiting list for the program stretched years into the future. "Kids get it," Oliver explained during a youth heritage conference. "We understand that these places and traditions aren't just for social media. They're part of who we are, where we came from." Michael O'Brien's original footage had been incorporated into virtual reality training programs. Visitors to major historical sites now experienced immersive orientations that helped them understand the significance of ceremonial guards and proper conduct. "Technology can either separate us from tradition or connect us to it," he noted, while demonstrating the VR system. "We're choosing to use it as a bridge between past and present." Marcus Thompson had been promoted to oversee International Guard exchange programs. Ceremonial guards from different cultures now trained together, sharing techniques and traditions while strengthening global heritage protection. "Every culture has its guardians," he explained during an exchange ceremony in Japan. "When we learn from each other, we strengthen all our traditions." The tourism industry had embraced the changes wholeheartedly. Major travel companies now marketed heritage-conscious packages, complete with cultural education components and certified guides. What had begun as compliance with the Mitchell Doctrine had become a selling point. Colonel Richard Harrison presented the 2-year impact report to the United Nations. The statistics were overwhelming. 90% reduction in reported incidents of disrespect at historical sites, 85% increase in visitor engagement with educational materials, 95% positive feedback from cultural site staff, 78% increase in youth. Participation in heritage programs, social media platforms had developed sophisticated AI systems to promote respectful content from historical sites. The algorithms now favored educational content over sensational posts, changing the way people shared their travel experiences. The Hampton Court incident taught us that viral fame isn't worth the cost of disrespect, explained a social media executive. "Now we're using our platforms to celebrate those who approach heritage sites with proper reverence." The Palace Heritage Trust had expanded its reach globally. Their Respect and Remember program had been adapted for different cultures and contexts while maintaining its core message about the importance of preserving traditions. "What works here works everywhere," noted a trust spokesperson, "because respect doesn't need translation." 3 years after the incident that changed everything, a special reunion was organized at Hampton Court Palace. The participants in that fateful day gathered to reflect on how one moment had transformed not just their lives, but the entire landscape of global tourism and cultural preservation. James Mitchell arrived early that morning, his ceremonial uniform as pristine as ever. Though he had been promoted to Chief of Heritage Guard training, he still insisted on performing regular guard duties. "The uniform isn't about rank," he explained to a group of new recruits. "It's about service, about being part of something greater than yourself." Sarah Chen had just won an International Press Award for her documentary series, Guardians of Tradition. Her cameras were rolling again today, capturing this unprecedented gathering. "Every person here represents a different aspect of the story," she observed. "Together they show how one incident can ripple through time." Derek Anderson's arrival caused a stir, not of antagonism, but of curiosity. The man who had once been the face of tourist disrespect was now one of the most respected voices in cultural sensitivity training. His latest book, The Respect Revolution: How Tourism Changed Forever, had topped bestseller lists worldwide. "Coming back here," Derek said, looking up at the palace walls, "I feel both shame and gratitude. My worst moment became the catalyst for my life's most meaningful work. Emma Collins brought a group of her students, young heritage ambassadors who had been inspired by the incident. They moved through the palace grounds with natural respect, embodying the changes their teacher had helped create in global education. These children, Emma noted, watching them interact with visitors, will never know a world where historical sites aren't treated with reverence. That's perhaps the most profound change of all. Thomas Walker, despite his advancing years, stood as proud as ever. The veterans organization he had founded now had chapters in over 50 countries. "We're not just protecting buildings or traditions," he explained to a gathering of international veterans. "We're protecting the connection between past and present, between sacrifice and recognition." Lucy Bennett's son, Oliver, now a teenager, had become the face of youth heritage protection. His childhood drawing of the incident hung in the palace's educational center, alongside photographs documenting the global changes it had inspired. "I remember being scared that day," Oliver reflected. "But now I understand it was a moment when adults learned something that kids already know, that some things deserve our respect just because they're important." Michael O'Brien had transitioned from casual videographer to renowned documentary filmmaker. His latest project explored how social media and tradition could coexist respectfully. "We've learned to use technology to enhance respect rather than exploit tradition," he explained during a panel discussion. Marcus Thompson, who had been the second guard that day, now oversaw international guard exchange programs. Under his leadership, ceremonial guards from different cultures shared techniques and traditions, strengthening global heritage protection. "What happened here that day," Marcus observed, "showed us that guards aren't just protecting places, we're protecting principles." Grace Parker had revolutionized the tourism industry with her cultural sensitivity training programs. Tour companies worldwide now required her certification course before allowing guides to lead groups at historical sites. "The questions visitors ask have changed completely," she noted. "They don't ask, 'Can we make the guard move what?' anymore. They ask about the history, the tradition, the meaning behind the ceremony." Colonel Richard Harrison presented the 3-year impact assessment to the gathered media. The statistics told a story of unprecedented change. 0 incidents of guard harassment at major historical sites for the past year, tourist satisfaction rates at all-time highs, record participation in cultural education programs, significant, increase in young people pursuing careers in heritage protection. The Palace Heritage Trust had created a permanent exhibition about the incident and its aftermath. From disrespect to global change, attracted visitors from around the world, each leaving with a deeper understanding of why traditions matter. Social media platforms had transformed their approach to content from historical sites. New algorithms promoted educational content and respectful behavior, while warning labels appeared on any posts showing disrespect to cultural traditions. "We've created a digital environment that encourages respect," explained a tech industry representative. "The viral moments now are ones that celebrate tradition, not those that mock it." The reunion culminated in an unexpected moment. Derek Anderson, the former antagonist, approached James Mitchell's guard post. This time, he stood at a respectful distance and offered a formal salute, a gesture that symbolized how far both individuals and society had come. The crowd, watching the interaction, included tourists from around the world, all of whom understood its significance. No one held up phones to record it. Instead, they simply observed, demonstrating the new era of conscious tourism that had emerged. From that conflicted day 3 years ago, "This is what change looks like," Sarah Chen narrated for her documentary, "not just in rules or laws, but in hearts and minds." 4 years after the Hampton Court incident, its influence had spread. far beyond the realm of tourism and cultural heritage. The Mitchell effect, as sociologists now called it, had begun to transform unexpected aspects of society, from corporate culture to international diplomacy. James Mitchell had been invited to speak at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Standing before global leaders in his ceremonial uniform, he represented something larger than military tradition. What happened that day, he explained, wasn't just about a guard and a tourist. It was about the choice between instant gratification and enduring values. Sarah Chen's latest project explored how the incident had influenced corporate behavior. Major companies were now implementing heritage-inspired leadership programs, using the principles of ceremonial guards to teach executive restraint and dignity under pressure. Companies realized, she noted in her TED Talk, that the same discipline that keeps a guard composed under provocation can help leaders maintain integrity under pressure. It's becoming a new paradigm for professional behavior. Derek Anderson had been appointed to the United Nations Advisory Council on Cultural Understanding. The man who once spat at a guard was now helping shape international policy on cultural respect. His journey from villain to advocate had become a Harvard Business School case study in personal transformation. Cultural arrogance in business is what led to my behavior that day, he told a gathering of international executives. Now, companies are learning that respect for tradition isn't just morally right, it's good business. Emma Collins's educational methods had been adopted by business schools worldwide. The guard principle, as it became known, was being taught alongside traditional management theories. Students learned how maintaining composure and dignity could be more powerful than aggressive reactions. What we learned from the guards, she explained during a keynote at INSEAD, is that true strength often lies in disciplined restraint rather than immediate reaction. Thomas Walker had seen his veterans' organization evolve into a global consulting firm. Companies hired former ceremonial guards to teach corporate teams about maintaining professionalism under pressure. The discipline of guard duty had become a model for business conduct. Every guard knows, he told a corporate training session, that your uniform represents something bigger than yourself. Now businesses are learning that their brand requires the same kind of disciplined representation. Lucy Bennett's son Oliver had started a youth entrepreneurship program based on ceremonial guard principles. Young guard entrepreneurs taught teenagers how to apply military discipline to business ventures, emphasizing integrity over quick profits. Kids understand that going viral isn't always the answer, Oliver explained at a youth business forum. Sometimes standing firm in your values is more important than getting attention. Michael O'Brien's documentation of the incident had become required viewing in diplomatic training programs. Embassies worldwide used it to teach cultural sensitivity and the importance of maintaining composure in international relations. Diplomats are like guards in a way, he observed during a State Department presentation. They need to maintain dignity while representing something larger than themselves. Marcus Thompson had been recruited by major corporations to develop training programs in professional conduct. His experience as a guard was now shaping how companies trained their customer service representatives to handle difficult situations. The principles are the same, he explained to a corporate audience. Maintain composure, represent your organization with dignity, and never let provocations compromise your professional standards. Grace Parker's tourism principles had been adapted for corporate hospitality training. International hotel chains were now training their staff using methods inspired by ceremonial guards, emphasizing dignity and composure in customer interactions. The hospitality industry learned, she noted at an international hotel conference, that maintaining standards under pressure earns more respect than giving in to every demand. Colonel Richard Harrison presented research showing how companies adopting GUARD principles had seen improvements in employee retention rates, customer satisfaction scores, crisis management effectiveness, brand reputation metrics, international business success. The Palace Heritage Trust had expanded its mission to include corporate consulting. From palace to boardroom, Lessons in Dignity had become their most successful program, teaching businesses how to maintain standards under pressure. Social media companies had developed new AI systems that promoted content showing professional restraint and dignity. The algorithms now favored examples of composed responses to provocations, changing how people viewed conflict resolution. "We're seeing a shift," explained a social media executive. "Content showing dignified responses to provocation gets more engagement than reactive confrontations. The GUARD principle is changing online behavior." International business schools had created a new concentration: heritage-based leadership. Students studied how traditional ceremonial roles could inform modern business practices, with the Hampton Court incident as a central case study. "What we learned from that day," explained a professor at London Business School, "is that traditions survive for a reason. They encode wisdom about human behavior that remains relevant in modern contexts." 5 years after the Hampton Court incident, a special global symposium brought together everyone whose lives had been touched by that momentous day. The gathering wasn't just a reunion, it was a celebration of how one moment of disrespect had sparked a worldwide revolution in human behavior. James Mitchell, now serving as Global Director of Heritage Protection, stood at his old post one last time before retirement. Looking back, he reflected, addressing an audience of international delegates, what happened here wasn't just about protecting tradition, it was about discovering what truly matters in our fast-paced world. Sarah Chen's final documentary, in her Guardian series, was premiering at the symposium. The 5-year effect chronicled how a single incident at Hampton Court had created ripples that transformed everything from tourism to international relations. "Every story has a moment that changes everything," she narrated in the opening sequence. "But few stories change the way humans interact with their own history." Derek Anderson had come full circle. Standing before the spot where he had once displayed such disrespect, he now led workshops on personal transformation. "My journey from shame to purpose," he told a group of business leaders, "shows that it's never too late to learn respect." Emma Collins's educational revolution had reached every corner of the globe. Her curriculum had been translated into 127 languages and was being taught in schools from Beijing to Buenos Aires. "Children today," she observed, "grow up understanding that respect isn't optional, it's fundamental to human interaction." Thomas Walker, though now in his 80s, stood proud as he watched a new generation of guards take their posts. The veterans program he had started now operated in over 100 countries, preserving military traditions while teaching their deeper meaning to civilians. Lucy Bennett's son Oliver had grown into a respected youth leader. His childhood drawing of the incident had become the logo for an international youth movement dedicated to preserving cultural heritage. "What started with one guard standing firm," he told a youth conference, "became millions of people standing up for respect." Michael O'Brien's original footage had been designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Digital Asset, the first video to receive such recognition. "Sometimes," he noted during the symposium, "the most important moments in history are captured by accident." Marcus Thompson had transformed guard training into a global standard for professional excellence. Companies worldwide now sent their executives to learn the guard method of maintaining composure and dignity under pressure. Grace Parker's tourism revolution had created a new category of travel: heritage immersion. Tourists no longer just visited historical sites. They learned their stories, understood their significance, and became part of their ongoing narrative. Colonel Richard Harrison presented the final 5-year impact study, showing how the Mitchell effect had influenced international diplomacy, corporate culture, educational systems, social media behavior, professional training, cultural preservation, global tourism. The Palace Heritage Trust had become a United Nations partner organization helping to protect cultural sites worldwide. The Hampton Court Protocol was now international law, ensuring that heritage sites everywhere received the same level of respect and protection. As the symposium concluded, a new permanent exhibition opened at Hampton Court Palace. The day Respect Changed Everything told the story not just of one incident, but of humanity's return to valuing its own history. James Mitchell's final act in uniform was to train his replacement, a young guard who had been inspired to join after watching the viral video years ago. The uniform, he told his successor, isn't just about tradition, it's about standing firm for what matters, no matter what comes your way. And there you have it, the complete story of how one moment of disrespect transformed into a global movement for respect and understanding. But this isn't just a story, it's a reminder that every action has the potential to change the world, for better or worse. If you found this story powerful, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications to catch these amazing stories and more. Your support helps us bring these important messages to the world. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Remember, respect isn't just a word, it's a choice we make every day.